welcome to another unboxing video from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander, and today we're taking a look at Pacific War, the struggle against Japan, 1941-1945. So this is just put out by GMT Games, designed by Mark Herman. So, where to start? First off, this might be one of the biggest boxes of wargaming. This big 4-inch box. And this is a total kind of rework of the old version of Pacific War that I believe was put out by SPI. It may have been Avalon Hill, I forget. So we're just going to kind of dive on in. The game itself apparently is very good at an operational level, because it covers like the entirety of the Pacific Theater in World War II. You can play it solo, you can play it 2 players, but like the campaign says 3 to 100 hours. Like you can make this as big or as small as you want, but I have heard that at the smaller level, when you do like a single operation and there's lots of smaller scenarios for those, they're very good. Which is kind of what I would expect, having played Empire of the Sun. Mark knows what he's talking about, is one of kind of those, you know, blue chip designers, is what I would say. So massive box, couldn't be more full. This thing weighs like 17 pounds or something stupid like that. So there's a lot of paper in here. There's a lot. This is some of it's mounted maps, but the core rulebook is huge. So I know this is going to scare some of you off, and that's totally fine. Not every game is for everyone, but the core rules. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Okay, the core rules, before you get to optional stuff, 58 pages. Once you start getting into the optional stuff and some solitaire guidelines, which I think is really nice that those were kind of at least put in, because I know most people are going to probably be playing this solo. Indices, so the optional rules are only a couple pages. Got 61 pages of kind of actual rules. But these are, and I don't know, we'll look through the playbook here and the engagement scenario rules separately. This is all for the campaign game, which apparently is kind of like a bit silly, and we don't really actually ever play that. What we're playing this game for are the engagement scenarios and the battle scenarios. That's what you're looking at this game for, apparently. So the engagement scenarios rules manual, I apologize. This isn't the scenarios themselves, I don't believe. So all the different game markers, so you don't need to read those core rules necessarily. I think you can just read these. I might be wrong about that. But yes. So if you look here, it's got all of this stuff from all these commands and strategic intelligence and all this stuff, and it just says it's not used in these. So all of that's like half of this stuff from the beginning of here, it's just like we don't even use that. We literally don't even use that. Yeah, movement rules, searching for fleets, submarine warfare, air missions, naval combat. This is kind of what you would, and this is apparently where kind of the game shines, when you're doing these kind of smaller actions. So you can read just those rules, or the battles. I think these are slightly larger scenarios. These are the more kind of operational based stuff, I think. So you do have operational intelligence and a bit more kind of maneuvering around and bits and pieces and launching your attacks. But you still don't have like the optional rules and the solitaire bits and pieces. So I think we're going to be using either of these rules. I don't think we're going to be using the main campaign rules. Mark himself says it's kind of a little bit insane to play that. So the scenario book, which has 66 pages of scenarios in it. So let's have a quick look at these. So the engagement scenarios are what we start with. It's a little introduction of kind of what all these different things are about. The engagement scenarios is set up all of these pieces, and you just go 1 naval combat cycle, or you might go 2 battle cycles. It's much smaller scale stuff. It's line up the units and fight each other in the terrain, basically. And most of the stuff is kind of already right there. Then you get into the... what do we call them? That was the engagement. The battle scenarios, where they're a bit longer, I believe. So it's like, you know, we're in campaign stuff. Ignore the campaign stuff. The battle scenarios, here we go. The battle scenarios last a number of days instead of just like just us shooting each other over the course of some hours. So like this is 21 days. Battle scenario number 4, Battle of the Eastern Solomons. This, apparently, the battle section is like peak this game, I think. That's, again, what I've been told. So that's probably more of what we're going to do. We'll do some engagements, we'll do some battles. There's like 7 campaigns in here, and it takes 100 hours to play the whole thing, and it's... I don't know. I don't have the time or space for that, honestly. I could barely fit 2 maps on this table, barely. Alright, then we have, still more paper, haven't even got to the game yet, Battle of the Coral Sea, extended example of play. And I think we might start with something like this, where we just kind of set this up and walk through it as he describes how, like, you know, the game is, like, this scenario is played out, but he walks you through, you do this move in this bit because of this. You know, the tactical decisions are made for you. We're explaining how we're implementing the rules to do the things you need to do. So we will probably jump off with something like this, because Mark often, you know, if you'll play his games, it's like, oh, it's very hard. He'll just say, did you follow the example of play? And you say no, and you feel like an idiot. So I think we'll probably start with that and kind of jump into some of the other stuff here. Okay. So, and we've covered maybe 3/4 of an inch of stuff in here. So, we have maps that are fully mounted. Oh, I've got some of the other cardboard here. Let's ignore that. There is a paper map in here as well, I believe. Okay, cool. Before we go any further, we have 2 little 10-sided dice. An orange one and a blue one. Came in a little bag. So, the mounted maps, I think there's a paper map in there as well. So, these are, interestingly, these are glossy, which is not typical of GMT games. So that's, I don't know if I played a game of this that had a glossy map before. Okay, we'll open these up. And it is 22 by 34. Yeah, you can see the glare on these. That's quite extreme. But it is the very dark blue hexes and the numbers, and the white ones for where it's land stuff. It all seems to be fairly clear. So this is the southern part of the map. You can see it kind of cuts it off here, you know, 3/4 of the way up Japan. When we have this other map that we're going to stick it on here. I don't know, you can't see that, but it goes up there. And so this map has the tip of Japan and Australia, and then we got China, Siam, and India. And the way that the map is laid out, everything's kind of written this way. I think that's the way it's supposed to play, but it's kind of like wrapped, so to speak. So you have like Alaska over here, Japan, USSR, and then like China and India are kind of wrapping around the equator, and then Australia's down here, and so you've got Hawaii and Pearl Harbor. So when you're looking at it this way, orienting yourself, it just takes a little bit to get used to, but you know, the Philippines and Indonesia kind of all goes down this way. So, you know, most maps are kind of from this angle, or it's kind of more like that. So just understand that that's how you have to kind of orient yourself as well. We'll just kind of fold these up because they take up so much space. But on this map, you have a little terrain key. You got some like weather zone location map. You have different zones because the map's so big and covers like, you know, half the world basically, that you have different weathers in each of those, which I think is pretty neat as well. And then there's, I think, a die roll that you're going to roll, and you'll get that particular weather in this yellow zone with this yellow die roll, with the red one from the red zone. So that's the maps. Huge, by the way. And then, okay, we're just gonna fish all of this out. So we have like 8 counter sheets or 10 counter sheets, something stupid like that. We'll get to those here in a second. So we have our replacements record sheet. So we've got January 41, 42, 43, 44. Is that supposed to say 45? Did they make a mistake on those? They probably did. That's what it looks like. Yeah. Looks like that was a mistake. This should say 45. But you're going to note on here all of your replacements. And there's an absolute ton of those. So, a huge amount of those. So this is the little paper map that they included, which is just a small section of one of those big mounted maps. And this is what the extended example of play is played on, I believe. And so I'm sure there's other smaller engagement scenarios that are played in this as well, so you use it more than just that example of play. But I think to start off with, they just kind of wean you in. You're going to play on this a couple times. But it's just a small section on paper of one of the other maps. Allied Force Display, Japanese Force Display. These are displays 1. Allied Force Display 2, Japanese Force Display 2, Allied Force Display 3, Japanese Force Display 3, Allied Force Displays 4, Japanese Force Display 4. I believe these are used in the campaign games. I could be happy to be wrong about that, but basically you have all of your different task forces that you're going to use, and presumably this is like the US Army and US Navy. Could be wrong about that. And you have screening units and then core units. So you're going to have, you know, your fleet carriers and battleships and who knows what. And then you have destroyers and cruisers out here screening, I would imagine. And submarines, that kind of thing. So that's a lot of displays if you're playing the big boy campaigns, I believe. We have our operations display, which has a strategic initiative track, naval movement track. This is our day track with our month beginning. That's wild. And then we have a random determination. You roll a die for deciding light conditions. And this is a naval combat display. So when you have 2 task forces fighting it out, stick them on the battle board. You can withdraw units. Units get destroyed. That kind of a thing. Pacific... Oh, good gracious. This is big. Allied display sheet. Man, this is a lot of paper. I'm hoping that this is just for the campaign game, and I don't have to worry about half this stuff. This is the Allied screen. I don't know if you set this up like a DM and have this hidden. This is all your combat results tables and charts, and air naval combat results tables and charts and modifiers. This is the search chart. This looks complicated, but it looks kind of cool. All various dice roll modifiers for what you're searching for and how far away it is. Oh, I don't know. We'll see. That'll be very interesting. Then we have a Japanese version of that. Japanese display sheet. So this is what's on display. And then this is the Japanese screen. So do you put the screen up around the display? I don't know. But this looks like a lot of the same types of information. But I think the modifiers on it might be different themselves. I'll think about something like the search chart. Do the search charts look the same? No, they do in the end, don't they? Okay. It'd be cool if there was some asymmetry in there. If there was some historical basis for that, but they may well not warrant that. So, we got all of that. Great. That's just an unconscionable amount of stuff. And we haven't even got to the counters yet. Of which, once again, there are a horrendous amount. And I genuinely, once these are all punched, have no idea how you get in the back of the box. That's a mystery to me. Because everything else in the box, there's literally like one inch of space, maybe. And when you punch these, they never This fits in the box, but when they're all punched, you're never going to get it back in. So, let's just have a little look. Counter sheet 1. Look at all the airplanes. It's kind of what we're at. Whole bunch of U.S. naval aircraft that's carrier-based, presumably. And then we have a whole bunch of U.S. Army Air Force stuff. So we got bombers, fighters, and everything else in between as well. And these are very small little counters. And they are dual-sided as well. Then we... Oh, so many aircraft. Then we have the rest of the carrier-based aircraft, rest of U.S. Army Air Force. And then we've got Japanese naval aircraft, Japanese Army aircraft. It looks like we got some bases for anchors, for naval bases, and airstrips for air bases as well. And then we have some Commonwealth RAF forces, and some grey ones. These are probably Royal Naval carrier-based aircraft, if I had to guess. And then we have like actual Commonwealth aircraft. These are Royal Air Force specifically. Dutch East Indies-based aircraft. Red Air Force aircraft, more Japanese naval aircraft, more Japanese Army aircraft, and then we land units. Alright. So, land-based units. These look like Marine units, Commonwealth infantry, well, probably British, Dutch. Now, are these Chinese or are these Russian? One of these two is Chinese, the other one's Russian. I can get... based on the colours from Empire of the Sun. And this is Japanese Army infantry. And then we have more Japanese Army infantry. And then we've got Special Naval Landing Force, kind of Japanese Marines, so to speak. More bases, more aircraft. Again, dual-sided. And then, now we get into the ships. Alright. So these are going to be U.S. naval forces, and these counters are bigger than these ones. And hopefully there's a way to, like, manage these so you don't have, like, a couple of stacks of aircraft on each of these carriers, because that's going to be a lot. But I believe each one of these carriers is one ship. So you have, like, USS Enterprise, Wasp, Essex, and Hornet. Each one an individual carrier. And there is an insane amount of all of these. The little carrier ones have planes on them. I don't know if those are integral or if that means they can carry one of those plane units. Then we have Japanese naval units as well. Again, we got a bunch of aircraft carriers here. And then battleships, it looks like. Destroyers. And then we got some Royal Naval ships as well. And then we have a lot of task force markers. And so we had those task force displays earlier. I would like to think that you can just kind of put these on the board and you're moving the task forces around, and then you reference the off-map task force display. If it's not, then they're doing something else that I'm not expecting. But generally speaking, that's how those work. Again, you got US task forces, Japanese task forces. And a whole bunch of these counters, not quite sure what those are for. I'm sure they're involved in combat or something like that. And then a whole bunch of allied bases. And a whole bunch of admin markers as well. So it's only 10 counter sheets. So, you know, I haven't played many games with more than that. I don't think I played any games with that many. I think 8 is the most I've ever done before. But it's an unconscionable amount of stuff. But remember, the campaign game, the reality is you're probably never going to play it. And if you are, good for you. Please tell me about it. But you're going to punch some of that stuff. You could punch it all if you were so inclined. But we're going to kind of punch as we go. Set up that example of play. We're going to punch just those counters and play with those. We'll pick an engagement, do that. We'll pick a couple battles, do just those. That way it's at least somewhat more manageable. Because if you're going to punch all that and take the time to do all of this, it's going to have a hard time getting back in the box to start with. And then it's also just, it can be somewhat overwhelming. So anyway, that is Pacific War from GMT Games. It is like such a big game. I don't even know how it fits on my shelf. kind of made as like an old school monster game, like redone. I don't know if it was done as a joke, like they got us, they boomed us with this, but I'm gonna play it because apparently the actual combat stuff and the operational stuff is extremely good. I'm never gonna play the whole campaign. I just don't have the space for that. But apparently there's a lot of merit in this, and there's a lot of game in this. So we're going to get this played, kind of dive into it, let you know how it goes, and kind of take you on our journey with it. So I appreciate you very much for tuning in. I've been Alexander from theplayersaid.com.